I'm sure you are aware. And so what engagement, as far as that particular is concerned, is going on? Can you share that with us?
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the flood affected tens of thousands of people across the water channels. The stakeholder engagement is an ongoing exercise. Here on my feet, I will not be able to provide answers to who has been engaged so far and who has not. Suffice to say, as he draws my attention to it, as I mentioned, we'll work with the regional administration and NADMO to get those specific details, to make that determination, and to provide the necessary assistance. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let me come to Ho West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to find out from the Minister, since this is about resettlement, have they found a land? Can you assure this House that government has found land in these affected areas for the resettlement? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in answers to subsequent questions, you would notice that I make reference to the Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority, LUSPA, that has been working with our ministry through the local government and the regional administration to identify potential places where, depending on the size of the resettlement exercise, we could locate this. And so my answer to him is that yes, LUSPA is working with the Ministry of Works and Housing on that specifically. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Member for Northton.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Honourable Minister for Works and Housing if he is aware that thousands of our fellow compatriots are still living in tents and congested classrooms 6 months after this spillage. Has he visited them since he became Works and Housing Minister? Has he been to the ground to see the situation for himself? And can he confirm the President's address to the nation during the 67th Independence Day celebration, a copy of which I have here, where he said that 80 million cedis has already been released. I'm quoting the President verbatim. As set out in the 2024 budget, government has set aside 220 million cedis, of which 80 million cedis has already been released by the Ministry of Finance to support the ongoing rehabilitation efforts for the affected communities, unquote. Is he aware of this 80 million cedis release, and what is this being used for? Because those of us on the ground don't see anything happening on the ground.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you once again for the opportunity. My colleague will recall that I have only been Minister for Works and Housing for just about 3 weeks. I have not completed the exercise of visiting all the important areas, constituencies that are affected by the various projects. I intend to do so. As I'm sure he would have noticed, I have started an exercise of visiting communities that are affected by various projects by the ministry. So I intend to do so. Mr. Speaker, I earlier alluded to the 80 million cedis that has been set aside for the purposes of supporting the rehabilitation and resettlement. And as he confirms, the President also spoke about it in the independence speech. I earlier mentioned it here, that it is money that has been set aside to assist in this exercise. A part of the exercise, or the beginnings of the exercise, is the engagement to ascertain what the real numbers are, to ascertain those who have that need of resettlement, or those who perhaps require just some sort of support on their existing structures so that they can go back into those existing structures. All of that assessment is ongoing, in addition to the stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned. And as I mentioned, institutions like LUSPA are working with the Ministry of Works and Housing to determine where, if necessary for that resettlement exercise, the scope and the size and the dimensions will be. And that will be my response, Mr. Speaker.
Let me now jump to urgent question B, which stands in the name a member for Saudai, Honorable Roxanne Nelson Iche Kwame Dafiamapo. Yes, Honorable, you have the floor now.
Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to ask this very important question. After mentioning all my duly accredited names, Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask the Minister for Works and Housing what urgent steps the ministry has taken to provide immediate low-cost housing to resettle the flood victims of the dam spillage in the Volta region. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the current stage of the government's coordinated response to the Akonsombo Dam spillage, led by the Interministerial Committee, involves the provision of relief to affected communities and individuals. Simultaneously, an assessment of the spillage's impact on livelihoods and properties is underway, as I mentioned earlier. The outcome of this ongoing assessment will inform the government's decisions regarding possible resettlement options. I will accordingly inform this House as progress is made. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr.
Honorable.
Speaker,
Yes.
I feel sad listening to the minister. Very sad. This is a disaster that affected in excess of 50,000 people. And as soon as this occurred, a 13-member interministerial committee was set up, chaired by the Chief of Staff. And it's been over 6 months. So for the minister to be saying that stakeholder consultations are still ongoing and that they are now trying to ascertain numbers, Mr. Speaker, the people need to be resettled. So, Mr. Speaker, my question was in respect of what urgent steps. It means after 6 months, no urgent steps has been put in place.
Very well.
So, Mr. Speaker, my question is this. My first supplementary is this. When can we expect some concrete steps on the ground in resettling the people? When? Exactly when? Especially when 80 million has so far been disbursed. Exactly when do we see action on the ground?
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it's first important to correct the fact that 80 million Ghana cedis has been set aside. 80 million Ghana cedis aside, and it will be for the purposes of rehabilitation, etc. Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge the urgency with which this matter is raised. It's a matter that is of concern to the Republic, and that's why with
2024 was that 80 million has thus far been released. And we, as the elected representative of the affected people, are asking, how has the 80 million thus far been applied? When as we speak, there's no visible action in terms of any concrete effort on the ground. Mr. Speaker, private persons have come in to assist in terms of providing low-cost housing. And yet the government, the central government, has not even bothered to copy the efforts of the private people. So,
Honorable Member,
so
the commentary is too much.
Yes.
Ask the question.
It's a foundation, it's a long foundation to a short question. And that is that, Mr. Speaker, can the minister tell this House how has the 80 million Ghana cedis as indicated to be released by the President been applied? Especially because the relief item that came to the people initially was provided by the Volta River Authority and not the central government. The central government provision is 220 million, out of which we are told that 80 million has been released. How has that been applied? We want to know, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. If my colleague requires a breakdown of the utilization of 80 million Ghana cedis, I'm sure that's information that the ministry can subsequently provide to him. As I stand here on my feet, I don't have that breakdown. If that is what he requires, we can make it available to him. I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, finally, the minister has indicated to the House that stakeholder consultations are ongoing. Mr. Speaker, exactly who are they consulting? Because We, the MPs, the elected representatives of the affected people, we have not been consulted in any capacity. Mr. Speaker, no meeting has been held with us, no letters have been written to us for even information, and yet we have the figures. So who are they consulting if the Honourable Minister can inform the House?
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the stakeholder engagement is an ongoing exercise. I can understand my colleague if he says that he has not been engaged specifically so far. As he mentioned earlier, over 50,000 people were affected. It's an ongoing exercise, and it will get to him in due course. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Member for Who West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the Minister's answer, the Minister of Works and Housing is preparing for the low-cost housing. I want to find out from the Minister whether the Ministry has designs for specific design for the various low-cost housing for the affected communities. Thank you very much.
Yes, Honourable.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed we do. The designs that have been used in the reconstruction of the Apiatse village and the technology, the rural housing technology that has been applied in the reconstruction of Apiatse is exactly what we intend to use for the possible resettlement exercise when there's clear data on how many people and the scope and size of that resettlement exercise. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let me go to Esri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want the Minister to clarify the confusion that is currently in our minds concerning the President's statement and your statement. The President was emphatic that the 80 million has been released. You have stated that it has been set aside. Can you tell us where the 80 million cedis is currently at? Is it sitting at your ministry or still with the Ministry of Finance, or it has been spent, or what? What is the true status of that 80 million cedis that you and the President are using different words to describe currently? Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. As I've mentioned already, my colleagues require a breakdown of the utilization of 80 million Ghana cedis. That's a breakdown that can be provided subsequently. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
I'm grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, listening carefully to the Honourable Minister for Works and Housing, he is telling us a while ago, in his response to Honourable Thomas Ampim, that he can later on present to us a breakdown of the utilization of the 80 million. So, for clarity, is the Honourable Minister for Works and Housing telling us that the 80 million cedis has been utilized, it's been used. That is our understanding. So he'll bring us the breakdown later. So we want him to confirm that the 80 million has been used, it's been utilized, for which he will later on present us the breakdown. We just want that clarity.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to repeat. My words I have spoken are that 80 million Ghana cedis have been set aside. My colleagues are insisting that their understanding is...
Mr. Speaker, our colleague, the Minister for Works and Housing, is very clear in his mind what colleagues are looking for. It's an emergency, and 80 million has been set aside for that. Can you tell us whether the 80 million is still set aside, is lodged in an account, or is being used? At least give us an indication. Is it being used, or is still money, Nigerians will call it Udio money, which is just money now, doesn't exist? Does it exist? If it exists, where is it? If it's being used, tell us something. So you cannot just say that it's been set aside. The emergency is ongoing. So what have you used the money for?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have been at length to explain the various interventions that are ongoing. Specific to the question of resettlement, I have explained that first it is important to do an assessment of who specifically needs to be resettled. What are those specific numbers? Who needs to be supported to move back into their already existent structure? Somebody may just need a little bit of support on their old structure. Somebody may need to move into a totally new edifice. That assessment, as I've mentioned, is ongoing. And I've also mentioned that stakeholders are being engaged. My colleagues are asking to give a specific answer on what this 80 million Ghana cedis that has been set aside has been utilized for. And I'm saying to them that if indeed this 80 million Ghana cedis is being utilized, we'll be able to provide that information before this house. We are all in this house. It's information that we'll be able to provide. As we speak now, the information as is available to me is that 80 million Ghana cedis has been set aside, is that the exercise of assessment and stakeholder engagement is ongoing. And in my answers so far, I have mentioned that when it is done, I will provide the full brief before this house. I understand the urgency of the situation, but I encourage my colleagues to join me with some patience so that we provide that information. Food and water have not yet been extended to the site. In addition, the site lacks basic sewage systems, making it uninhabitable in its current state. Mr. Speaker, moving victims of the Akonsombo Dam spillage to Saglemi Affordable Housing Project is tantamount to resettlement, as government will have to move the people from their communities to a new location. This will require significant study of affected communities, their social ties, their cultural practices, in order to minimize the effect on their culture, livelihood, and other socio-cultural attributes. It will also disrupt the education of children, among others. Mr. Speaker, I assure this August House of government's commitment to facilitate access to decent accommodation for people affected by the dam spillage. Accordingly, provision has been made in the 2024 budget to provide support to the victims, including the provision of housing. In preparation for government intervention, the Ministry of Works and Housing has engaged the Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority, LUSPA, and a roadmap has been drawn for the provision of low-cost housing. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable.
I'm grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my first supplementary question. The Saglemi housing project, the Honorable Minister indicates that what is left is just electricity, water, and basic sewage systems, to use his words exactly. Could this not have been done within a few weeks? It's 6 months after the disaster. Thousands are living in tents, congested classrooms. In preparation for the Africa Games, your government was able to find $60 million to renovate hostels at the University of Ghana for games. Games, $60 million.
Honorable Member, just go on with the question.
So 6 months and just extension of electricity, water, and basic sewage system. Is the Works and Housing Minister telling this House that this could not have been done within this period?
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity. I am under the impression that we are finding solutions for the people of Ghana. But since my colleague wants to talk about our government, he may tempt me to talk about their government as well and how they have handled Saglemi. I believe that if we want to talk about solutions for the people who have been affected by the spillage, I have outlined the steps that we are taking. Mr. Speaker, specifically on Saglemi, Saglemi was to provide 5,000 housing units at a value of about $200 million. Currently, Mr. Speaker, 668 units have had the shell infrastructure completed, despite the fact that $196 million out of the $200 million has been paid out to the persons who were contracted to build it. Water that they were supposed to provide was not provided. A sewage system was not provided. Electricity connection was not provided. The paved roads that were supposed to be connected were not provided. Mr. Speaker, he says it is only a simple matter of connecting these items to it. We asked the Ghana Institute of Surveyors to do the assessment, And Mr. Speaker, they came back with a staggering $114 million as the figure required to spend extra to bring Saglemi to a habitable state. In fact, the argument is that if this amount of money is provided, that is when you will be able to complete the Saglemi project. So, Mr. Speaker, Saglemi is not, respectfully, the answer to the housing or the alternative housing required for the people who have been affected by the Saglemi, by the Volta Dam spillage. As I've mentioned earlier, on that specific matter, the efforts are underway. On the matter of Saglemi, Cabinet approved a decision to find private sector partners to bring a resolution to that matter, and we intend to bring that resolution as quickly as possible. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Kujoto.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. I'm surprised that the Honorable Kojo Komproma didn't add that Honorable Atacha, his predecessor, made some of the payments. But, Mr. Speaker, the substantive supplementary question is to find out from the Honorable Minister if he is aware that the safe havens they relocated the victims of the spillage to, these safe havens also do not have basic water, sewage systems, and electricity. They are living in tents and congested classrooms without these amenities. Is the minister aware?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows very much, safe havens are not intended to be permanent places of residence. They are temporary places of residence to take people away from the emergency situation that they find themselves in. In fact, in the safe havens that were provided, they were not built for the purpose of permanent accommodation, not envisaged to be there. I've mentioned that the persons who were affected have been assisted mostly to move back into their original places of abode. He and some of my colleagues here have drawn our attention to the fact, while the assessment is ongoing, that there are some who have not returned. And I've mentioned that in assessing how many are actually affected who are still having outstanding accommodation issues, a determination will be made. As I've made earlier at this point, that is the path to resolving the issues of those who require settlement. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to find out from the Honorable Minister for Works and Housing how the government feels and his ministry feels to see that the MP for the area, my good self, and benevolent Ghanaians have been able to put up structures. In 7 weeks, we have housed 600 people. Decent accommodation. 7 weeks, and the whole government with all our taxes. 6 months. You are here talking about stakeholder consultation. How do you feel? I want to know.
This personal question, do you want to? Well.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful. The responsibility of supporting persons who are affected is one that is shared. You would recall that the government played a role in providing initial relief, but the government could not do it alone. Members of Parliament from the affected areas also did their due by helping to provide some support. In fact, I recall some state agencies going to support some members of Parliament who were providing interventions. The Honorable Ablakwa, who speaks, I recall him receiving support when the former Minister of Finance went into the constituency to support some of the members of Parliament. Our colleagues in the media who are up here, on their own accord, on their platforms, raised a lot of support also to help our brothers and sisters who had been affected. We had churches, we had organizations, and I believe that that collective effort is one that we should applaud. On the side of the government, I have said here at this dispatch box that the final phase of the exercise, which involves determining exactly how many people require resettlement, is ongoing. And that when that exercise is completed, I will be here to provide all of that information. And Mr. Speaker, while I'm here, let me also commend our colleagues in the media, our colleagues on the other side, and the government agencies, all of who played their part in helping to bring some respite to our brothers who were affected. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Queen's, I'll come to you. Yes,
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can I find out from the minister when, or the minister should give me a timeline within which government will be able to resettle our people in Central Tongue, North Tongue, and South Tongue.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it appears it's the same question that are being raised. Yes, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. As I've mentioned earlier, that assessment is being done and the necessary stakeholder engagements are taking place. When it is completed, it will give a determination of how many people specifically and the scope of that resettlement. It is that which will give me the opportunity to give a specific timeline to the question that he asked. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll give it to the lady. All of you have already spoken.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Minister if he has a fair idea of how many constituencies or communities were affected. I have said that it's about 11. I don't know what your records tell you. This is important because it will put in context what the scope is and how many people you are planning to address. Because Katu South, Kata and Anglo also suffered as a result of this spillage. But in most of the communication that I've seen, they have not been captured properly as having been affected by the spillage of the dam. So please, what's the figure that you have and the communities?
Yes, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is a House of Records, so I will not want to give a figure that is not accurate. But I want to just make a comment that what she's saying is indeed true. The initial comments you hear appear that it's a matter that affected only a few communities. In fact, as far north as in Yeji, and even in some of the areas in the eastern region around Mpraeso, etc., these there were communities there that were affected by this spillage of the Volta Dam. The initial assessment around the Volta area, Honorable Ablakwa, etc.'s area, comes to about 50,000 people. But the numbers that are coming up from the engagement suggest that way up north, there were some other communities that were affected. When we are done with this proper assessment, I can answer that question specifically with a number that will not be disputed. But I just want to agree with her that many other communities were affected and therefore need to be factored into this assessment and resolution. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll take the last one from Queenster.
Thank you.
You have already spoken. Yeah, Queenster, let me hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say thank you for acknowledging my children from Aguna East when I wasn't here, Kwenyaku specifically. So I'm saying thank you for acknowledging.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for thanking me.
Speaker, may I move that item number 15 on page 8 of today's paper be taken? I so move.
Yes.
Speaker, I second the motion.
Honourable members, this is a procedural motion. All in favour of the House adopting the procedural motion numbered 15 on today's order paper, say aye. All against, say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Item 16, I suppose.
Speaker, I rise to move that this Honourable House adopts the report of the Committee on the Constitutional and Legal Affairs on the host country agreement for the establishment of the headquarters of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, CVF, in Accra, Ghana. Speaker, in so doing, I present the committee's report and invite Hansard to capture the entirety of that. while I limit myself to just some portions of it. Speaker, the Climate Vulnerable Forum formed in the year 2009 is a global partnership of 68 climate vulnerable states with a combined population of some 1.74 billion. The CVF is one of the key leading voices in advocating for global climate goals adopted by 196 parties in Paris on 12 December 2015. Speaker, under the CVF leadership rotation arrangement, Ghana assumed the presidency of the CVF in May 2022 and has since worked diligently to secure significant milestones, including increased global engagements and expansion of CVF membership from 56 to 68. In conclusion, Speaker, the committee has thoroughly considered the host agreement for Climate Vulnerable Forum and finds Ghana's decision to host the secretariat laudable. Opportunities to be accrued Ghana include job creation, stimulation of the local economy through inflows of foreign currency by delegates attending meetings and activities of the forum, strengthening of capacity and knowledge in climate resilience policy planning and implementation, and attracting more green investments in the economy. The committee accordingly recommends the House to adopt its report and ratify by resolution the host agreement for establishment of the headquarters of the Climate Vulnerable Forum in accordance with Article 75 of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. Respectfully submitted. Speaker, thank you.
Yes. Who is? Honourable members, the motion has been moved and seconded for the consideration of the House. Can I put the question now? Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I think that I rise to support the motion and to say that the hosting of this headquarters of Climate Vulnerability Forum is a very important one. The issue of climate change is a very topical one, and for Ghana to host the Climate Vulnerability Headquarters signals to the sub-region and Africa that Ghana is doing everything possible to take the leadership position in this area. And there are a lot of advantages that will accrue to Ghana if we indeed do that. And so I urge my colleagues to support the motion to make sure this host agreement for the establishment of the headquarters is approved. I so move.
Does the Minister of Finance wish to comment on this motion? Very well. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the motion as moved by the Chief Whip and seconded by the Deputy Minority Leader. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this is a good thing. Ghana, in fact, this Parliament is playing a leadership role in climate vulnerable agenda in terms of our advocacy. As you may be aware, our colleague Dr. Mafo and Mr. Speaker are the lead players, together with the President of the Republic, who is also a patron. And the hosting of this, as the report says, gives us an opportunity to play a strategic leadership role. Obviously, it means issues with regard to climate issues will be more highlighted in our country. And if we do our things right, we can take advantage of this. Mr. Speaker, as I always say to my colleagues who are part of the climate advocacy group in the media, so far, it appears to me like a talk shop. They have attended conferences everywhere, spoken everywhere, but I haven't even seen that leading to the reduction of bushfires yet. So let this not just be that we are champions of talking and hosting and never see the impact of that on our society. If we are actually sensitive to this, it should reflect in everything we do: agriculture, transportation, energy use, building, and everything. And until we are able to do that, this will not be too much of benefit to us. But now that we are hosting this, Mr. Speaker, it gives us opportunity to showcase our sensitivity to this and be able to do things that improve our environment and give us an opportunity to tap into the new economy where things are done sustainably yet improve the health of the economy. So, Mr. Speaker, I recommend this for the approval of colleagues from both sides. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Very well, so I'll put the question. So any are in favor of the House adopting the motion, say aye. All against, say no. The ayes have it, the motion is carried. Item 17 is a resolution. Are you ready to move the resolution? Yes.
Speaker, may I seek your leave for the Deputy Minister to take the item instead? It's your leave.
Yes, Honorable Deputy Minister, or Minister of State Designate for Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the resolution captured as item 17 on today's order paper be adopted now. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, who is seconding? Yes.
I second, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the motion has been moved to adopt the resolution numbered 17 on page 9 and 10 of today's order paper. All in favor of the House adopting the motion, say aye. All against, say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. This House has adopted the resolution numbered 17 on page 9 of today's order paper. Yes.
Speaker, as was announced earlier, I guess we are ready to now break to your committee of the whole to do the other.
We deferred the laying of the bill. They have now found the order, so I invite the Honorable Attorney General to now relay the bill. Yes.
An act to amend the Criminal and Other Offences Procedure Act 1960, Act 30, to expedite the conduct of criminal trials in an efficient, effective, and fair manner, and provide for related matters.
The paper is duly laid. It's referred to the Committee on Constitutional and Legal to consider and report.
Speaker, we are ready to break into committee of the whole now.
Very well. I'll suspend sitting and come back to preside on the Committee of the Whole. Housing, the sitting is suspended.
Yes, leadership.
Speaker, having regard to the time, we are clearly in your hands, but we've exhausted all we had planned, and therefore I think that, judging from the face of the minority leader, who is extremely exhausted, so Speaker, may we